our roadmap for today's conversation, which hopefully we've made the case that, look, stakeholder management is a priority. And if we're not focused on this, we run the risk of being blindsided on some of these opportunities. So we're going to build ourselves up into masters through this and set a really solid foundation in terms of the introductory approach to this is. So first of all, taking away that all buyers are not created equal. And depending on your exposure to our Mobilizer research, you may or may not be exposed to or know this. And then finally, see the board and consider the entire buying journey. We got to understand who is involved in this process. So if we start with, hey, this concept that all buyers are not created equal, I think to your point, Gurdeep, we all know this anecdotally, but what does the research say? And this is a study that we ran after the Challenger sale to hypothesize, hey, look, salespeople fall into 5 major categories, right? The Challenger, the relationship builder, the hard worker, the lone wolf, etc. Can we categorize buyers similarly? And the answer that we found through the research, studying 700 B2B buyers around the globe in different industries, was yes. They can be broken down into 3 major categories, starting first and foremost with mobilizers. These are individuals that are activated by insights, they're skeptical, they're curious, they are vendor neutral, and they support good ideas. And there are 3 types of mobilizers: go-getters, who are just relentless in getting it done; the teacher, who sells the vision on our behalf; and finally, the skeptic, who makes us prove it. And these are in order of their likelihood to drive organizational action. Beyond that, our second category is talkers. These are individuals who always take our call, they're accessible, they share information easily, but do not have the internal capital to drive decision-making. And there are 3 types of talkers, right? The guide who's been at the organization for everywhere, who tells you everything; the friend who loves to hang out, always takes your call; and finally, the climber who's out for personal gain and bails at the first sign of personal risk. The friend is the only of the talkers that has a positive impact on organizational impact because they've been at the organization for so long, while the friend and the climber actually drive a negative impact to organizational action. And then third and finally, again, no surprise to any salespeople on the line, of course, are our blockers. They are not just against the purchase of a specific solution. They are agents of the status quo, and they can fall into 3 major categories. Pro-status quo, oftentimes because they are the ones responsible for that status quo. Pro-competitor, because they got a buddy at a competitor organization; or anti-supplier, because they've had a bad experience with us previously. Gurdeep, for folks and organizations that perhaps are seeing this for the first time, what would you encourage them to want to take away from this in terms of common language, or what's the right way to interpret this data?
Yeah, so there's 2 things I would suggest here. One is, common language is key. So making sure everyone on the regional sales team is able to, use these terms and understand what each term means is very, very important. And then also, just making sure everybody's aware of who the players are from the customer that fall into each one of these categories is also very, very important. Now, some people on the call might say, well, it's obvious, I don't need to have these discussions because it's pretty self-explanatory who falls in each one of these buckets. But what I've seen over some discussions is, some people may categorize somebody as a mobilizer, where somebody else on the group may categorize them as a talker. Until you have that discussion, until you ask that question, it may not be as obvious to everyone as it appears. And having that categorization really changes the way everybody on the regional sales team should be talking to those people. So your conversation with a mobilizer is going to be completely different than your conversation with a blocker, right? And everybody on the team should be aware of who these people are so that they can be prepared to have those kind of conversations in case one of those people end up being in their meeting. We've even started mapping this out more in our CRM and giving people the ability to, identify the stakeholders with, as if there are mobilizers, talkers, or blockers, again, to kind of do a better mapping for an opportunity. So it is, I'd say it's a very useful feature as well. And also the other thing I can say there is, some people, a lot of people, I'd say all salespeople don't want to walk away or never want to walk away from a job, right? But you got to have a set of criteria to help you decide if a project is good or bad for your business. And, this should be one of those criteria. If you have a large project you're going after, but you cannot firmly identify a mobilizer, and all you have is potentially blockers, is it worth pursuing that project? I mean, that's definitely a strong criteria that I think organizations should be using in order to decide whether they should be moving forward and staying out of that 70% loss rate that you mentioned earlier, and really trying to focus all their efforts in winning those jobs that they have the most chance of getting.
You're absolutely right, Grady. The hardest thing for a salesperson to do, and this seems to be one of the most common questions I get when I do just general trainings or deal workshops, accelerators, what have you. Hey, when should I walk away from a deal? And that is the age-old question. I think for us, it's really twofold. And if we take this a step further and we use this framework to identify, well, what does our buying group look like? Let's identify who everybody is. Let's categorize them as a mobilizer, a talker, or a blocker. Understand what we're working with. And to your point, if we feel like we've run into a headwind, depending on the stakeholder we're engaging with, who is our mobilizer? And really, I think there's two ways that we would encourage folks to look at this. And first and foremost, diagnose the opportunity. Is it a good fit for your solution? And how we often talk about that is a concept we introduced in the first webinar in the series, Stop Wasting Time on the Wrong Opportunities, is reframe potential. Is what's the delta between the pain of staying the same and the pain of change, right? The larger that delta, the more likely they are to want to take action. And again, we know from my conversation with Dr. Jonah Berger just a few weeks ago, in his research and psychology, is the potential outcomes of taking action have to be 2.6 times greater than the cost of inaction in order to get folks to look at this. So that enables us to look more strategically at an opportunity. And then once we've done that, what's our powerful request? Right? It's a great way to pressure test an opportunity, pressure test a stakeholder. And for folks that have been through Challenger training, know it's four things. It's what we want, why we want it, whom we want it from, and when we want it by. And if we can do that, we can hopefully get a deal unstuck once we've kind of mapped out who this buying group is.